The scream that tore from Delilah's throat echoed through the bitter cold morning air. But no one came running because there was no one left to hear. Her stepbrother Marcus had made certain of that when he dragged her across the frozen Montana ground toward the old barn at the edge of their property, his fingers digging cruelly into her arm as she fought against him with everything she had. It was December of 1883, and the first major blizzard of the winter was already beginning to gather strength in the gray sky above them, promising weeks of isolation in the remote ranch that sat 20 miles outside of Helena. "You think you can take what is mine?" Marcus hissed, his breath creating clouds in the freezing air. "You think that lawyer in town will listen to some girl over me? Our father left this ranch to both of us, and I will be damned if I let you sell your half to strangers." Delilah's 20-year-old body trembled, though whether from cold or fear she could not say. "That is my right. Papa wanted us to share this land, but you have made it impossible. I have every intention of starting my own life, Marcus. You cannot stop me." But he could, and he did. With a violent shove, Marcus threw her into the barn, and before Delilah could scramble to her feet, he had slammed the heavy door shut. She heard the thick beam drop into place on the outside, sealing her in darkness broken only by thin streams of gray light filtering through gaps in the weathered wood. "You will stay here until you see reason," Marcus called through the door. "Until you agree to sign over your half to me." "No one knows you are here, Delilah. The nearest neighbor is 10 miles away, and with this storm coming, no one will venture out for months. Think about that while you freeze." She heard his footsteps crunching away through the snow. And then there was only silence and the howling wind that had begun to pick up, announcing the arrival of the blizzard that would bury the Montana landscape for the long months ahead. Delilah pulled herself to her feet, her body shaking violently now. The barn was not meant for human habitation. There were old horse stalls, some ancient hay bales, and farming equipment covered in dust and rust. The temperature inside was barely warmer than outside, and she knew with sickening certainty that Marcus meant what he said. He would leave her here to suffer until she broke, until she gave him what he wanted. Her stepbrother had always been cruel, even when their parents were alive. Marcus was 26, born to Delilah's stepfather's first wife, and he had never accepted Delilah or her mother when they came into his life 12 years ago. When Delilah's mother died of pneumonia 3 years past, and then her stepfather followed just 6 months ago after a fall from his horse, Marcus's true nature had emerged fully. He wanted the ranch entirely for himself, wanted to erase any trace of Delilah's claim to the land her stepfather had loved and worked. The first night was the worst. Delilah huddled in the corner of an old horse stall, wrapped in the few burlap sacks she could find, listening to the wind scream and the snow pile against the barn walls. She called out until her voice was hoarse, but there was no one to hear. The ranch house was 300 yards away, and Marcus had boarded up the windows facing the barn. He had planned this carefully. When weak winter dawn finally came, Delilah forced herself to explore her prison more thoroughly. She found an old bucket she could use for necessary purposes, a few moldy horse blankets that she shook out and wrapped around herself, and in the loft, some dusty grain sacks that still held a bit of wheat and oats. It was meager, but it was something. Marcus came once that first week, opening the door just wide enough to throw in a small loaf of bread and a canteen of water. "Changed your mind yet?" he asked coldly. "Let me out of here," Delilah screamed, rushing toward the door, but he slammed it shut before she could reach it. "Sign over your rights, and I will," he said through the wood. "Until then, enjoy your winter accommodations." Days blurred into weeks. The blizzard Marcus had predicted came with a vengeance, burying the barn in snowdrifts that rose nearly to the roof. Delilah rationed the bread and water Marcus occasionally left, supplementing it with the raw grains she found and melted snow that seeped through cracks in the walls. She was always cold, always hungry, always alone with her thoughts and her rage and her growing despair. She tried to escape. She spent days working at the boards of the barn walls with a rusty nail she found, but the wood was thick and old and stubborn, and her fingers bled from the effort. She tried to dig under the door, but the ground was frozen solid. She screamed until her throat was raw, hoping someone, anyone, might pass by and hear her, but the winter kept everyone away. January came and went. Delilah marked the days by scratching lines into the wooden post of the stall where she slept. She talked to herself to keep from going mad, told herself stories, sang songs her mother had taught her, anything to fill the terrible silence between the howling storms. Marcus came less and less frequently. Sometimes a week would pass with no food, no water, and Delilah survived on snow and the few grains she hoarded like precious gold. She grew thinner, weaker, her body consuming itself to stay warm. Her dresses hung loose on her frame and her face became gaunt and hollow-eyed, but she did not break. Even as her body weakened, her spirit hardened into something fierce and unyielding. She would not give Marcus what he wanted. She would rather die in this frozen prison than let him win. February arrived with slightly less brutal cold, though the snow continued to fall. Delilah had been imprisoned for nearly 3 months, and she could feel herself fading. She slept more and more, conserving what little energy she had. Sometimes she dreamed of her mother, of warm fires and hot meals and the feeling of being loved and safe. It was on a morning in late February when everything changed. Delilah heard something she had not heard in months, the sound of a horse approaching. She dragged herself to the wall and pressed her face against a crack, peering out into the blinding white landscape. A rider was moving slowly through the deep snow, heading not toward the ranch house but parallel to it, as if he was simply passing through on his way somewhere else. Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance. She filled her lungs with the frozen air and screamed with everything she had left. "Help! Help me! Please, I am in here! Help!" The rider's horse startled at the sound, rearing slightly. The man steadied his mount and looked around, clearly trying to locate the source of the voice. Delilah screamed again, pounding her fists against the barn wall, and this time she saw the rider turn directly toward the barn. "Hello," the man called out, his voice deep and cautious. "Who is there, in the barn? I am locked in the barn, please, you have to help me." She heard the horse approaching, heard the crunch of boots in snow, and then the rider was at the door. "Stand back from the door," he commanded, and Delilah scrambled backward. There was a terrible cracking sound as the man forced the beam up and away, and then the door swung open, flooding the barn with brilliant white light that made Delilah shield her eyes. When her vision adjusted, she saw him standing in the doorway, a tall figure backlit by the snow. "Good God," the man breathed, stepping inside. "Madam, what happened here?" Delilah tried to speak, but her voice had abandoned her. She swayed on her feet, and suddenly the man was there, catching her before she fell. She looked up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with sharp blue eyes that were wide with concern and shock. He was perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair visible beneath his hat, and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. "Easy now," he said gently, supporting her weight as if she weighed nothing at all. "I've got you. You are safe now." "My stepbrother," Delilah managed to whisper. "He locked me in here 3 months. Please do not let him find me." The man's face darkened with fury. 3 months. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. No one is going to hurt you again, madam. I promise you that. My name is Samuel Vaughn, and I am going to get you out of here." Samuel carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently despite the unusual burden. He wrapped Delilah in his own heavy coat, and she nearly wept at the warmth of it, at the smell of leather and horses and the outdoors that clung to the fabric. He mounted behind her, holding her securely against his chest, and turned the horse away from the ranch. "Wait," Delilah said weakly. "My things, my mother's things, they are in the house. We will come back for them," Samuel said firmly. "Right now, I need to get you somewhere warm and safe. There is a doctor in Helena, and that is where we are going. Marcus will stop us," she said, fear creeping into her voice. "Let him try," Samuel said, and there was steel in his tone that made Delilah believe him. They had made it perhaps a quarter mile when Marcus came running from the house, shouting and waving his arms. "Stop! That is my sister. What do you think you are doing?" Samuel reined in his horse and turned to face Marcus, but his arms remained protectively around Delilah. "Your sister, is it?" he said coldly. "Then perhaps you can explain why I found her locked in your barn, half-starved and frozen after 3 months of captivity." Marcus's face flushed red, then white. "That is family business. It has nothing to do with you. Delilah, tell him this is a misunderstanding." "It is no misunderstanding," Delilah said, and she was pleased to hear her voice grow stronger. "You imprisoned me, Marcus. You tried to force me to sign over my inheritance. This man saved my life, and I am leaving with him." "The hell you are," Marcus snarled, reaching for the rifle he had slung over his shoulder, but Samuel was faster. In one smooth motion, he had drawn his own pistol and aimed it directly at Marcus. "I would not do that if I were you," Samuel said, his voice deadly calm. "You have already committed enough crimes for one winter. Do you really want to add murder to the list?" Marcus froze, his hand still on his rifle. "You do not understand. She is trying to steal my land." "I understand that you locked a woman in a barn through a Montana winter," Samuel said. "I understand that is attempted murder, no matter how you try to justify it. Now, you have 2 choices. You can let us ride out of here peacefully, or I can shoot you where you stand and claim self-defense. Either way, Miss Delilah here is coming with me, and you will answer for what you have done." For a long moment, Marcus stood there, his face twisted with rage and calculation. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand from the rifle. "This is not over, Delilah," he said. "That land is mine." "We will let the law decide that," Samuel said. He wheeled his horse around and urged it forward, not lowering his pistol until they had put significant distance between themselves and the ranch. The ride to Helena took hours, and Delilah faded in and out of consciousness, sustained only by the warmth of Samuel's body behind her and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. Samuel talked to her softly, keeping her awake, asking her questions about her name, her life, anything to keep her engaged and alert. "Delilah Lawrence," she told him when he asked. "My stepfather was Thomas Lawrence. He owned the ranch with his first wife, and when she died, he married my mother. Marcus is from his first marriage. Thomas tried to be fair to both of us, but Marcus has always hated me." "Thomas Lawrence," Samuel repeated thoughtfully. "I knew of him. He was a good man by all accounts. I am sorry for your loss." "Did you know him?" Delilah asked, surprised. "Not personally, but I heard of him. I work as a ranch hand and occasional guide, traveling between properties looking for work. I was passing through your area on my way to a job near Helena when I heard you calling. Seems Providence put me in the right place." "I thought I was going to die in there," Delilah whispered. "I had almost given up." "But you did not," Samuel said gently. "You held on and you fought and you survived. That takes remarkable strength, Miss Lawrence." They reached Helena as evening was falling, and Samuel took Delilah directly to the home of Dr. Morrison, an older man who took one look at her and immediately ushered them inside. While the doctor examined Delilah, Samuel spoke with the local sheriff, explaining what he had found and where. Delilah spent 3 days under Dr. Morrison's care, slowly regaining her strength with the help of hot food, warm beds, and the doctor's medicines. Samuel visited her every day, sitting beside her bed and talking with her, telling her about his life on the trail, his dreams of one day owning his own small ranch, his love of the wide open spaces of Montana. Delilah found herself looking forward to these visits more than anything else. Samuel had saved her life, but more than that, he treated her with a gentleness and respect that she had not known since her mother died. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and his eyes held a warmth that made something flutter in her chest. "You are a curious man, Samuel Vaughn," she said on the 3rd day when she was finally able to sit up without dizziness. "You were just passing by. You could have kept riding. Why did you stop?" Samuel looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes serious. "Because I heard someone in trouble, and I could not live with myself if I had just ridden past," he said simply. "But if I am being honest, Miss Lawrence, I am very glad I stopped. Meeting you has been unexpected in the best possible way." Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You barely know me." "I know you are strong enough to survive 3 months of hell without breaking," Samuel said. "I know you are brave enough to fight for what is right, even when it costs you everything. I know that when you smile, which you have not done nearly enough yet, it lights up your whole face. I would very much like to know more if you would allow it." Before Delilah could respond, Dr. Morrison entered the room with the sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Baker who had been the law in Helena for 15 years. "Miss Lawrence," Sheriff Baker said, removing his hat, "I have taken statements from both you and Mr. Vaughn here, and I have sent deputies out to your ranch to speak with your stepbrother. Based on what you have told me, I will be bringing charges against Marcus Lawrence for unlawful imprisonment and attempted murder." Relief flooded through Delilah. "Thank you, Sheriff. I was afraid no one would believe me." "Mr. Vaughn's testimony carries weight," the sheriff said. "He is known as an honest man in these parts. Furthermore, I spoke with your father's lawyer, a Mr. Henderson. He confirms that your stepfathers will left the ranch equally to both you and your stepbrother, and that you have every right to sell your portion if you choose. Marcus had no legal grounds to try to coerce you." "What happens now?" Delilah asked. "Now you rest and get your strength back," Dr. Morrison interjected. "You have been through a terrible ordeal, young lady. You need time to heal. And when you are ready," Sheriff Baker added, "you will need to decide what you want to do about the ranch. Marcus is being held in custody, but eventually there will be a trial. You may need to testify." Delilah nodded slowly, feeling overwhelmed. Just days ago she had been locked in a freezing barn, certain she would die there. Now she was free, but her future remained uncertain and complicated. After the sheriff and doctor left, Samuel remained. "You do not have to figure everything out right now," he said gently. "One step at a time, Miss Lawrence." "Delilah," she said. "Please call me Delilah. You have done so much for me, Samuel. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "There is nothing to repay," Samuel said firmly. "But I have a thought if you would hear it. Of course. I still have that job waiting for me at the Morrison Ranch, no relation to the good doctor," Samuel said with a slight smile. "It is a large spread about 10 miles outside of town. They are always looking for reliable workers, and I happen to know the foreman's wife is looking for help with the house and the cooking. You could stay there, work there, while you figure out what you want to do next. It would give you a safe place away from your stepbrother and time to make decisions without pressure." Delilah considered this. The thought of returning to her stepfather's ranch, even without Marcus there, made her feel sick. But she also had no money, no resources, no family left to turn to. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won. "I would be grateful for the work," she said quietly. "Thank you, Samuel." "The Morrison Ranch it is, then," Samuel said, and the smile he gave her made Delilah's heart skip in a way she had never experienced before. 2 weeks later, Delilah was settled into the Morrison Ranch, working alongside Mary Morrison, the foreman's kind wife who took Delilah under her wing without question or judgment. Samuel worked with the cattle and horses, but Delilah saw him every evening at dinner, and on Sundays, he would ask if she wanted to walk with him around the property. Those walks became the highlight of Delilah's week. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, as the snow melted and the first green shoots began to appear, Delilah felt herself thawing as well. The nightmares about the barn came less frequently. Her body filled out again, healthy and strong. And with each passing day, she found herself more drawn to the quiet cowboy who had saved her life. Samuel was unlike any man she had known. He was gentle but strong, soft-spoken but firm in his convictions. He treated her as an equal, asking her opinions, listening to her thoughts, never once making her feel less than or diminished. When he looked at her, it was with respect and something else, something that made Delilah's breath catch and her pulse quicken. "Tell me about your dreams," Samuel asked one Sunday as they walked along the creek that ran through the Morrison property. It was late March, and the air held the first real warmth of approaching spring. "My dreams," Delilah repeated, surprised by the question. "Yes." "What do you want from life, Delilah? If you could have anything, be anything, what would you choose?" No one had ever asked her that before. Delilah was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think I would want a home," she said finally. "A real home, not like the ranch where I always felt like an outsider. A place that is mine, where I am loved and safe. I would want a family, children someday perhaps. I would want to work hard at something meaningful, to build something with my own hands." She paused, then added softly, "I would want someone to share it all with, someone who chooses me every day." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Delilah," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I have been trying to find the right words, the right time, but maybe there is no perfect moment. I have to tell you something." Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," Samuel said simply. "I think I started falling the moment I heard your voice calling for help, and every day since has only made it stronger. I know the circumstances of how we met were terrible, and I know you are still healing from what Marcus did to you. I do not want to rush you or pressure you, but I need you to know how I feel. You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I would count myself the luckiest man alive if you would consider building that dream with me." Tears sprang to Delilah's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Samuel," she whispered, reaching out to take his hand. "I feel it too. I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself, because everything happened so fast and in such a terrible way. But when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like myself again, like the person I was before Marcus tried to break me. You make me want to believe in good things again." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then believe, Delilah. Believe in us. We will go as slow as you need, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable and true." "I believe you," Delilah said, and she stepped closer, allowing Samuel to wrap his arms around her. She rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart, and felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. April brought news from Helena. Marcus had been tried and convicted of unlawful imprisonment and assault. He was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison, and the judge had ruled that Delilah was under no obligation to maintain the ranch in his absence. She had full legal right to sell the property or do with it as she wished. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, visited the Morrison ranch to discuss Delilah's options. "You could sell the entire ranch," he explained. "With Marcus's conviction, his half reverts to you as the sole remaining heir. The property is worth a considerable sum, enough to set you up comfortably for many years." Delilah looked at Samuel, who sat beside her during the meeting. They had not made any formal announcements yet, but everyone on the ranch could see how things stood between them. "What do you think?" she asked Samuel. "It is your decision," Samuel said firmly. "Your inheritance, your choice. I will support whatever you decide." Delilah thought about the ranch, about the years of unhappiness there, about the barn where she had nearly died. "Sell it," she said to Mr. Henderson. "All of it. I want nothing from Marcus or from that place except to be free of it." "Very well," the lawyer said. "I will begin the process immediately. It may take a few months, but I am confident I can find a buyer." After Mr. Henderson left, Samuel took Delilah's hand. "Are you certain?" he asked. "That was your stepfather's legacy." "My stepfather's legacy was his kindness to me and my mother," Delilah said. "The land is just land, and it holds too many bad memories. I would rather use whatever money it brings to build something new, something good." "Build something new," Samuel repeated thoughtfully. "I have been thinking about that myself. I have some savings put by, nearly 3 years' worth of wages. It is not much, but combined with what you will get from the ranch sale, it might be enough." "Enough for what?" Delilah asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Enough to buy a small ranch of our own," Samuel said, his eyes bright with hope and possibility. "Nothing as large as your stepfather's place, but enough. Good grazing land, water rights, maybe a few cattle to start. We could build a house, a real home. We could build a life together, Delilah, if you will have me." "Are you asking me to marry you, Samuel Vaughn?" Delilah asked, her voice shaking with emotion. Samuel dropped to one knee right there in the Morrison parlor, still holding her hand. "I am," he said. "I know I do not have much to offer you except hard work and an honest heart, but those I can promise you freely. Marry me, Delilah. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel trapped or alone or unloved ever again." "Yes," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." They were wed in late May in a simple ceremony at the small church in Helena. Mary Morrison stood as Delilah's witness, and the Morrison foreman stood for Samuel. Delilah wore a simple blue dress that Mary had helped her make, and Samuel wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and so full of love that Delilah could barely breathe from the joy of it. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her tenderly, and Delilah felt something break open inside her chest, some last frozen piece of fear and hurt melting away in the warmth of his love. The ranch sale went through in July, and true to Mr. Henderson's word, it brought a substantial sum. Combined with Samuel's savings, they had enough to purchase a beautiful 200 acres just south of Helena, with good water, rich grass, and a small but sturdy house that had been built by a homesteader who had decided to return east. Samuel and Delilah moved into their new home in August, and they spent the late summer and fall working side by side to make it truly theirs. They purchased a small herd of cattle, some chickens, 2 horses, and a milk cow. Samuel built a new barn, and though Delilah felt a flutter of old fear the first time she entered it, Samuel held her hand and walked through it with her until the space was filled with new memories instead of old nightmares. They worked hard, dawn to dusk most days, but Delilah had never been happier. This was the life she had dreamed of, the home she had longed for. Every night she fell asleep in Samuel's arms, warm and safe and loved. Every morning she woke to his smile and the knowledge that she had someone who chose her, who valued her, who saw her as an equal partner in building their life. Winter came again, but this winter was nothing like the last. Their house was snug and warm, their pantry well stocked, and they spent the long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and planning for the future. "I think we should get more cattle in the spring," Samuel said one night, his arm around Delilah as they sat together on the small sofa he had built. "If we can increase the herd, we will have more to sell come fall." "More cattle means more work," Delilah pointed out, but she was smiling. "Perhaps we should think about hiring some help." "Perhaps," Samuel agreed. "Or perhaps we will have our own help in a few years, a son or daughter who can learn the ranch alongside us." Delilah felt her cheeks warm. "Is that your way of saying you want children, Mr. Vaughn?" Samuel turned to look at her, his eyes soft and full of love. "I want everything with you, Mrs. Vaughn. Children, if we are blessed with them. Years and years of working this land together. Growing old on this porch watching our grandchildren play. I want the whole beautiful life we are building." "I want that too," Delilah whispered, and she kissed him, pouring all her love and hope and gratitude into that kiss. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts. Samuel's skill with horses and cattle and Delilah's head for numbers and management made them a formidable team. They earned a reputation as fair, honest ranchers, and their small operation grew steadily. In the spring of 1885, Delilah gave birth to their first child, a strong, healthy boy they named Jacob Thomas Vaughn, after Samuel's father and Delilah's stepfather. Samuel cried when he held his son for the first time, and Delilah watched her husband's face transform with wonder and love, and knew that their family was complete in a way she had never experienced before. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Sarah Ann after Delilah's mother. And 3 years after that, another boy, William Samuel, who had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. The children grew up running through the fields of the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with chores as soon as they were able. The house that had seemed adequate for 2 quickly became crowded with 5, and Samuel spent a summer building an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. Delilah's children never knew fear in their home. They knew hard work, yes, and discipline when needed, but they also knew that they were deeply loved and valued. Samuel was a devoted father, patient and kind, teaching his sons and daughter with equal respect and attention. And Delilah found that motherhood suited her, that all the love she had been denied for so many years had simply been stored up, waiting to be poured out on her own family. Sometimes, late at night after the children were asleep, Delilah would stand on the porch of their home and look out over the land they had built together. The barn stood strong and well-maintained in the distance, filled with contented animals and hay and all the supplies of a working ranch. Nothing like the prison where she had once been trapped. Samuel would join her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, and they would stand together in the silence, listening to the night sounds of Montana, the crickets and the distant cows and the whisper of wind through the grass. "Do you ever think about that winter?" Samuel asked one such night when they had been married nearly 10 years. "Sometimes," Delilah admitted. "Not as much as I used to. Mostly I think about how it led me to you, to this life. I would not wish that suffering on anyone, but I cannot fully regret it because without it I might never have known this happiness." "I heard someone needed help and I helped," Samuel said. "But Delilah, you saved yourself. You held on, you survived, you chose to live and fight." "All I did was open a door. You walked through it and built this beautiful life with your own strength and courage." "We built it together," Delilah corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "Everything good in my life comes from us being together, from the partnership we have created." Samuel kissed her forehead gently. "Then I am the luckiest man alive, because I get to spend every day with the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known." News came occasionally from Helena about Marcus. He had been released from prison after serving his full sentence, and word was he had left Montana entirely, heading to California to try his luck there. Delilah felt no satisfaction from his misfortune, only relief that he was gone from her life completely. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1890, they had expanded their holdings to over 500 acres and ran a herd of nearly 200 cattle. They hired 2 regular ranch hands and a young woman to help Delilah with the house and the children during the busiest seasons. Jacob, at 10 years old, was already showing signs of becoming a fine rancher like his father. He was responsible and thoughtful, good with the animals and eager to learn everything Samuel could teach him. Sarah, at 8, was clever and quick, with a gift for mathematics that delighted Delilah. And William, at 5, was pure mischief and joy, keeping everyone on their toes with his endless energy and curiosity. One summer evening, the whole family gathered on the porch after a long day of haying. The children were tired but happy, and Samuel had brought out the guitar he occasionally played. He strummed a gentle melody while Sarah leaned against her mother's shoulder. Jacob sat whittling a piece of wood, and William fought against sleep in his father's lap. Delilah looked around at her family, at the home they had built, at the life they were living, and felt such profound gratitude that it nearly overwhelmed her. From the depths of despair and captivity, she had somehow found her way to this moment, to this beautiful life filled with love and purpose and belonging. "What are you thinking about, Mama?" Sarah asked, noticing her mother's expression. "I am thinking about how blessed we are," Delilah said softly. "I am thinking about how grateful I am for every single one of you, for this home, for this life we share. Even when William breaks things," Jacob asked with a teasing grin at his younger brother. "Even then," Delilah laughed. "I do not break things," William protested sleepily. "Things just sometimes fall apart when I am near them." Everyone laughed at that, and Samuel's guitar playing became livelier, and Jacob started singing in his changing voice, and Sarah joined in with her clear, sweet soprano. William perked up enough to clap along, and Delilah sang too, her voice blending with her family's in perfect harmony. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks and purples, Delilah caught Samuel's eye across the porch. He winked at her, his face full of love and contentment, and she smiled back, knowing without words what he was thinking. They had built something remarkable together. From the worst moment of Delilah's life had come the best things she had ever known. Samuel had heard her cries and set her free, but together they had built a life that was so much more than mere freedom. They had built a home, a family, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep, abiding love. The years continued to pass in the way that good years do, quickly but richly. The children grew into young adults with their own dreams and ambitions. Jacob took over more and more of the ranch operations, working side by side with his father. Sarah surprised them all by wanting to attend the new women's college that had opened in Missoula, and Samuel and Delilah supported her ambition, proud of their daughter's fierce intelligence and drive. William proved to have a gift for horses, and by the time he was 16, people were bringing their most difficult mounts to him for training. Samuel and Delilah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard ranch work, but their love only deepened with time. They still took walks together on Sunday afternoons when they could. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over their land. They still held each other every night, grateful for one more day together. In 1900, Jacob married a sweet young woman named Emily from a neighboring ranch, and they built a small house on the far corner of the property. The following year, they presented Samuel and Delilah with their first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl named Delilah Rose. And when Delilah held her tiny granddaughter for the first time, she wept with joy. "Your grandmother is a remarkable woman," Samuel told the baby, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "She survived the impossible and built a beautiful life from nothing. You carry her name, little one, and I hope you inherit her strength and courage." "And her stubbornness," Jacob added with a grin. "Do not forget that, Papa." "I prefer to call it determination," Delilah said, but she was laughing, her eyes never leaving her granddaughter's face. Sarah finished her education and became a teacher, eventually returning to Helena, where she opened a school for girls, insisting that young women deserved the same quality of education as young men. Samuel and Delilah attended the school's opening ceremony with pride bursting from every pore. William married a rancher's daughter from the next county, a spirited young woman who could ride as well as any man, and who gave William a run for his money in every aspect of life. They settled on a small ranch nearby, and William's horse training business flourished. As Samuel and Delilah moved into their 60s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting Jacob and Emily to manage things. They spent their time with their growing collection of grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom, teaching the little ones to ride and helping with homework, and simply enjoying the fruits of the life they had built. One evening in the spring of 1905, Samuel and Delilah sat together on their porch, much as they had done thousands of times before. They were in their early 60s now, both still healthy and active but aware that they had more years behind them than ahead. "You remember the day we met?" Samuel asked, holding Delilah's hand in his as they rocked gently in the chairs Jacob had made for them. "Every detail," Delilah said. "I remember thinking I was going to die that winter, and then I heard your horse outside. I remember your voice asking who was there. I remember the way you looked when you opened that barn door, like an avenging angel backlit by the snow." "You were so thin," Samuel said quietly, "so weak and fragile looking, but your eyes were still full of fire. I knew right then that you were someone special, someone worth knowing." "You saved my life, Samuel Vaughn." "We saved each other," Samuel corrected gently. "You gave me purpose and love and a family I never dreamed I would have. You made my life meaningful, Delilah. Every good thing I am because you chose to build this life with me." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The very best," Samuel agreed. "Better than I ever hoped for or deserved." "And we are not done yet," Delilah said firmly. "I plan to be a very old woman, Samuel Vaughn, with you right beside me, watching our grandchildren have children of their own." Samuel laughed and kissed the top of her head. "That sounds like a fine plan to me, Mrs. Vaughn. A fine plan indeed." And so they continued, year after year, watching their family grow and prosper, watching the ranch they had built thrive under Jacob's capable management, watching the town of Helena grow from a rough mining town into a proper city. They saw the turn of the century and marveled at the changes it brought, the new technologies and ideas, but through it all, they remained constants for each other, anchors in a changing world. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren, with a feast that lasted all day and music and dancing that went late into the night. Sarah gave a speech about her parents' love being the foundation on which all their lives had been built. Jacob toasted his father's wisdom and his mother's strength. William played a song he had written especially for them on the guitar his father had taught him to play. When everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Samuel and Delilah stood alone in their parlor, looking at each other with the same love and wonder they had felt as newlyweds. 30 years, Delilah marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Here is to 30 more, Samuel said, raising an imaginary glass. 30 more, Delilah agreed, and they sealed the promise with a kiss. The years beyond their anniversary were gentle ones. They became great-grandparents multiple times over. They watched their children become grandparents themselves. They moved a bit slower, needed a bit more rest, but their minds remained sharp, and their love remained constant. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1912, at the age of 73. Delilah woke to find him gone, and though the grief nearly broke her, she took comfort in knowing that he had not suffered, that he had simply slipped away in the warmth and safety of their bed, in the home they had built together. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Montana. Samuel had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him, and person after person came forward to share stories of his kindness, his fairness, his gentle wisdom. Delilah listened to them all, grief-stricken but proud of the man her husband had been. Jacob stood at the graveside and spoke of his father's legacy. "My father taught me that real strength is not about dominating others, but about lifting them up. He showed me that a good man honors his commitments, treats everyone with respect, and never stops working to build something better for those he loves. He saved my mother's life when they were young, but he spent the rest of his life showing her every single day that she was valued and cherished. That is the man I am proud to call my father, and the example I will strive to follow for the rest of my days." After Samuel was laid to rest, Delilah moved into the small house on the property with Jacob and Emily. Her own house held too many memories without Samuel in it, and her children worried about her being alone. She lived quietly, spending her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending a small garden, and writing down the story of her life so that future generations would know where they came from and what their family had overcome. She wrote about her mother and her kind stepfather. She wrote about Marcus's cruelty and her months of imprisonment in the barn. But mostly she wrote about Samuel, about the cowboy who had heard her cries and set her free, and about the beautiful life they had built together through hard work, determination, and most of all, love. Delilah lived to the remarkable age of 86, passing away peacefully in the summer of 1918, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In her final moments, she smiled and reached out her hand, and those present swore she said Samuel's name, as if she could see him waiting for her. They buried her beside Samuel on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple but elegant, inscribed with their names and the words they had chosen long ago. Together we built a life of love. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passing from Jacob to his children and their children after them. But it was always known as the Vaughn place, the ranch that Samuel and Delilah had carved out of the Montana wilderness through sheer determination and love. The place where a cowboy had heard a woman's cries for help and had chosen to answer, changing both their lives forever. And on quiet winter nights, when the wind howled across the Montana plains and snow piled against the barn, people said you could sometimes hear echoes of a woman's voice calling for help, and the steady hoofbeats of a rider approaching, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and love can find a way. The story of Samuel and Delilah became family legend, passed down through the generations as a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and love. Their descendants grew up hearing about the winter Delilah spent locked in the barn, about the cowboy who saved her, about the ranch they built, and the family they raised. It became the foundation story of the entire family, the moment from which everything else flowed. In 1950, the ranch celebrated its 70th anniversary, and descendants of Samuel and Delilah came from all over the country to commemorate the occasion. Jacob's son Marcus, named in an act of forgiveness for the stepbrother who had wronged Delilah so long ago, stood on the same porch where his grandparents had spent so many evenings together and read aloud from Delilah's memoir, the handwritten pages carefully preserved through the decades. "I was lost," he read in Delilah's words, "trapped in darkness and cold, certain that I would die alone and forgotten. But I held on because something inside me refused to surrender. And when Samuel heard my cries and opened that door, he did not just save my life. He gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. Together, we built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. We built a home, a family, a legacy of love that I hope will endure long after we are gone. If you are reading this, you are part of that legacy. You are part of the proof that even the worst circumstances cannot destroy the human spirit when it is met with courage and love." There were not many dry eyes when Marcus finished reading. The family gathered for a photo in front of the old house, 4 generations standing together in the place Samuel and Delilah had made their own, and that photo would hang in the homes of family members for decades to come, a reminder of where they came from and the love that had started it all. The barn where Delilah had been imprisoned was long gone, replaced generations ago by a modern structure that bore no resemblance to the original. But on the spot where it had stood, the family planted a garden, a riot of wildflowers that bloomed every spring and summer, beautiful and free and alive, a living memorial to the woman who had survived the impossible and built something beautiful from her pain. And so the story ended not with tragedy or loss, but with love and legacy, with generations of children who grew up knowing that they came from strong stock, from people who had faced the worst that life could offer and had chosen to build something good and true and lasting. The story of the woman locked in the barn and the cowboy who set her free became a story of hope, of the kind of love that changes everything, of the truth that even the darkest winter eventually gives way to spring. Samuel and Delilah's love story was complete, their journey finished, but their impact rippled forward through time in the lives of their descendants, in the ranch that still bore their name, in the family stories told and retold around dinner tables and on front porches, in the values of hard work and determination and compassion that they had passed down through the generations. They had lived and loved and built something that mattered, and in the end, that was more than most people could hope for. Their story was one of survival and rescue, yes, but more than that, it was a story of 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chose every day thereafter to build a life of meaning and love together. And that love, that choice, that determination to create beauty from tragedy, was the true legacy of Samuel Vaughn and Delilah Lawrence Vaughn, the cowboy and the woman he saved, whose love story became legend in the wild west of Montana, and whose descendants carried their names and their values forward into a new century and beyond.